Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column Live. I'm your host today, Brian Gerrish, and with me in the studio is young Malcolm Massey. I'm allowed to say that, Malcolm.
Thank you for saying I'm young, thank you.
It's my pleasure. Well, we've got a pretty interesting set of news for you today. We're going to have a look at the general hubbub and confusion as to what's being put across in the mainstream media and press. And then we're going to get into some of the substance really of why it's happening and who's doing it. Before we get started, of course, we should give you a quick report on the weather. It's been tough for you. You've been flooded. You've had snow.
Yep.
Well, you've got snow at the moment.
Frozen out. We've had gas pipes go. We've had water pipes go. It's been a very testing and trying month.
This is life in the vicinity of Taunton. So
Yep.
The snow unfortunately hasn't got as far.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, hasn't got as far as Plymouth. A lot of the children disappointed, but there we are, tough around the country. So if we start off, smoking's the issue.
Wow, what a story! What a story. Okay, so I saw this in the Metro, but we've also pulled it up on the Telegraph. Children as young as 12 are being offered nicotine patches at school without the knowledge of their parents or teachers. I just think it's quite a remarkable story. I'll just give you a little quick rundown of what the actual story is about. They're talking about NHS nurses that are operating in schools that are basically holding drop-in sessions where kids as young as 12 who are addicted to smoking, which is a sad case in itself, can get advice for treatments. This has caused a lot of outcry, of course, with parents, because parents are saying that they should be involved, whereas the NHS is using the whole confidentiality trick to, in my opinion, undermine parents, really.
Yeah.
And I think that can be sort of best highlighted by a comment that was made by a Department of Health spokesman, and a quote, "It's a matter for schools in consultation with parents, governors and local health services to decide whether to offer sexual health or stop smoking services." I think that's quite a remarkable statement. As we discussed, they're saying it's a matter for schools. Mm-hmm. I would say it's a matter for parents in consultation with schools and governors. So again, I think this is all a part of the trick to undermine the whole sort of parenthood within schools. I think it also goes a little bit deeper than that, though. I think that, you know, as we've seen with the ASBOs and the various other things, children wear these badges of honour, and those nicotine patches are going to be you know, badges of honour. That's what will happen. I'm
tough, I smoke.
Exactly.
And then they're going to be getting a direct dose of nicotine through the patch.
Yeah, which gets us into an early indoctrination of smoking, which then, you know, obviously keeps a child addicted to what is already a highly addictive drug. I mean, let's not forget that nicotine, you know, is on par with heroin in accordance to addiction. So I just thought it was a very, very interesting story. And
of course, the other thing is it's bringing the NHS in as well. So we've got NHS coming in, we've got social services coming into schools, we've got police coming in.
Yeah. And you might describe it, this might be a bit strong, but I'll say it, because it's my opinion, but I'll say it, is that the NHS seem to become the main drug dealers for Big Pharma now. You go to like a doctor's, you're instantly prescribed drugs, you may not necessarily need those drugs. A friend of mine went in with a stomach complaint, he was prescribed antidepressants with a stomach complaint, you know, and I think that getting these sort of, you know, these drug pushers into schools, I think, is a very dangerous thing.
Step, yeah. And what about this one? Biometrics here is the topic.
Well, this one is actually I think it's close at home. My partner, she basically used to work for a company. She doesn't anymore because she left on quite a number of principles. But one of them was that the company was bringing in biometric scanning, and they were saying that it was needed for clocking in and clocking out. What I'm following a little bit more research, I've noticed that biometric scanning is coming in, or in many instances is already in schools. So I started looking at a bit more information, and I found Info for Security, and they give a very interesting article about the Protection of Freedoms Act of 2012. And they're talking about the uses of biometrics for security. I mean, I myself would question that. I don't know. Is it proportional that, you know, do enough children get abducted from schools in order to have a biometric system? Is not the old school sort of clocking out by way of holding your hand up, yes sir, I'm here, is that not enough to know whether the pupils are
apparently not at the moment.
Indeed. Yeah. So I just wanted to read something very quickly out what the Info for Security is saying. So they're saying, under the provisions in the Protection of Freedom Act 2012, schools and colleges must notify and gain consent from the parents of pupils under 18. Now, I think that word consent is really important. I also think that, or in fact, the article also highlights that the child can still refuse consent even if the parents themselves consent to it. So really, this is another empowerment exercise for us to sort of, stand strong and protect our sort of liberties. I was talking to a solicitor about this exact same issue, right. And he was saying that basically, obviously it's down to consent. It has to be proportional, as in, is it proportional to have biometric security simply to clock in and clock out, or to know whether a pupil is on site? I would say no, but that's for all you guys to decide. And it also has to satisfy the user that the security, has gone to enough lengths to protect your data. And again, as the solicitor stressed, it has to be your satisfaction. And if it was me, I would never be satisfied that my data is going to be protected.
Collected. Yeah.
We've done a little bit further research into this, and a lot of this information technology has come from Lockheed Martin. It's then been bought by other kind of like production companies, who then put it into their own machines to actually sell that like to people in schools, in places of business and so forth. But with the sort of involvement of Lockheed Martin now in sort of capturing biometric data, and also taking the census, I mean, they do seem to be collecting quite a lot of data on people. I find that quite worrying, and I wonder, is that prepping us for something in the future? I don't know. But
future cities, maybe. But we'll come on to that.
We're coming on to that, but yeah, it's also attaching numbers to people, isn't it? And reference numbers, and also kind of in a way making us like stock.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that. We've just got a series of articles here. This is all part of the turbulence at the moment, that the press is just throwing stuff. One day it's okay to drink a glass of red wine, the next day it's not. We should eat more chocolate. No, we shouldn't. So the Americans are about to put women into the front line for combat fully. Now we've got people coming out of the woodwork and saying that well, the headline is very emotive: women not fit enough to fight on the front line. I don't think it's a question of fitness. I think it's a question of strength and stamina, and whether women are suited to combat in the front line, whether they should be. Do we want women fighting? Maybe when it's necessary, but do we need it as part of the thing? I think the whole article is designed to stir up turbulence. It's divisive. It's getting men and women in the services against each other. I think this is propaganda. I think this one's propaganda as well. The aim at the moment is to make everybody on the planet, and particularly everybody in the UK, think that there's a war going on around us the whole time. So here we're crowing that Al-Qaeda's number 2 in Yemen has been killed by a drone attack. What's the aim here? Well, it's keeping Al-Qaeda, this mythical organisation that's carrying out every terrorist act in the world, it's keeping them in the papers. And then I think this is almost putting the drones in a good light. Well done, drones, you've taken out this man. But as we know from Prince Harry at the moment, we've got people that are finding it difficult to distinguish between video games and killing people. It's getting pretty sad. And if that isn't bad enough, then the question of gay marriage is one of the most important things at the moment for the Conservative Party. Few people get prickly when we bring this subject up. I think it's a question of common sense. At the moment, we've got people who can't feed themselves. We've got youngsters who haven't got jobs. We've got the financial situation collapsing. We're starting another war in North Africa. But according to the Tories, the most important thing is gay marriage. Is this common sense? I'll leave it to the viewers and listeners. And Daily Record here talking about cancer drugs.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting to highlight, because this sort of links on with the horse meat. I don't want to say scandal, but the story that came out recently. Basically, what Mary Creer, I hope I've got that right, the Shadow Environmental Secretary, said that several horses slaughtered in the UK last year were found to contain traces of a carcinogen called phenylbutazone. That's all interesting in itself. What I wanted to highlight was basically that it's not just phenylbutazone that we should be worrying about that's passing through the food chain via the meat that we're eating. I think a big thing that I talk to about farmers is antibiotics, and I've been told by a lot of farmers that farmers in general use antibiotics and sometimes over-prescribe antibiotics because it fattens up their stock. It makes bigger animals, and therefore they can get a much better sale for it. Now, of course, that will pass through the sort of food chain, and when we're eating that meat, we're also eating antibiotics. I'm not saying people shouldn't eat meat. I'm just saying that just beware of where it comes from. If it's coming from a cheap source, then there's a very good chance that it's going to be cheap meat, which means it's going to be filled with who knows what it's filled with. But the big thing about antibiotics is that it does make animals put on weight, so it's not a stretch of the mind to think that if you're consuming that through the food chain, that you yourself will be putting on weight as a result of eating over antibiotics.
You got a few burgers here.
Yes. Well, I just wanted to highlight that this is the kind of meat that they're talking about when they're saying about the horse meat being contaminated with it. I find it strange. I don't suppose it says on the pack that it's got may contain horse meat, but whether that upsets people or not is down to their choice. I just think it's interesting when you consider we're starting to have quite a bit come out now about what's actually in our meat. Last year, we and other media outlets reported that pink slime, which is a spray which is basically sprayed onto the meat as a form of protection for it, is then carried through and ground up into the beef and is put into cheap burgers. That was found last year, and of course the very famous aborted fetal cells that are used in the production of Pepsi and Kraft. I'm just highlighting that because I'm just saying, look, we really have to start paying attention as to what's in our food.
What we are being given to eat. It's
Exactly.
not even a question of what we select, because a lot of people don't know what they're selecting.
Yeah.
And we know that the effect of the proliferation of antibiotics is that we're having trouble killing bugs, which leads us really to this Metro one.
It does, I think, and it's a very serious thing because, well, obviously because superbugs are very serious, but this thing where people, as soon as they've got an illness or they've got some sort of ailment, rather than sort of combating it in a natural way, they'll instantly go towards the antibiotics or they'll instantly go towards the painkillers and so forth. And this is obviously the kind of effect that is there's someone like Prince Philip is rubbing his hands together. The man who once said he wanted to come back, as a killer bug. Well, if the guy does get reincarnated, no doubt he'll come back as a superbug. And this is just playing into the hands. So we've really got to take control of, in my opinion, take control of our lives and start depending on nature and not on these sort of
huge global companies.
Exactly, because they've all got an agenda. They've all got an agenda.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to
Well,
say.
they're taking us in a particular direction if you follow things through, and this is an article about future cities, city of the future. Mike.
So Glasgow's been given £24 million by the government as part of a, believe it's £200 million pot to turn Glasgow into a city of the future. And I thought that phrase "city of the future" was quite close to the Agenda 21 term, future city. And in fact, David Willits is the minister who has made this announcement, and he said that the money would go towards making Glasgow a model of what a future city would look like and how it could run. So I think this absolutely clearly puts Agenda 21 right back on the agenda. If you'll excuse the pun or the double use of the word, and really what we're talking about is using technology in order to run cities in the future, and of course what that is inevitably going to lead to is even further spying and centralized control of our lives, I believe.
Yeah. And we were looking at some documentation a few months ago, I seem to remember, Mike, where in the description for a city of the future was the fact that they would even have ghetto areas where protesters or people who didn't want to be in this environment, that was the ghetto where you were going to be put.
Well, I think we commented on the first hints of that a couple of weeks ago on UK Column Live, where we were talking about people being removed out of their communities and put in containers in Amsterdam. Yeah. So the signs are there that this policy of Agenda 21 is slowly but surely being implemented.
So if we're looking at what's happening around us, we're getting the impression we're being attacked. Who's doing it? And of course, we need to bring up our leader, Chairman Cameron. And you've been doing a little bit of history on him here, 2005.
Yep.
What have you discovered about Mr. Cameron?
While I was thinking about David Cameron, people always said that he's a very inspiring speaker and so forth. So I was having a look at some of the speeches he gave, and it's remarkable that the man, back in 2005, was delivering crucial speeches, such as the one he gave against David Davos when he was trying to become made party leader. And the New Statesman basically reflected that, and I quote, "It can be truly considered the turning point in his leadership bid. He received a 3-minute ovation from party representatives after the speech, which was delivered without notes and without a lectern." Wow, I thought. And then I started looking at the Telegraph on the 4th of July 2011, where we were told that the Prime Minister basically has started to use a teleprompter, which presumably is now, with written speeches. So I thought that was all interesting, leading up to something that you found today.
Well, this is an extraordinary article from the Daily Mail. The headline is "Revealed: the raven-haired poet and former ice cream seller who wrote the PM's Big Europe speech." This is an incredible article, and I recommend that people read it to just see the crass nature of the thing. But here we've got this lady, Claire Forges, seems to have come out of nowhere working with the Conservative Party. I think she's got a master's in poetry. And now we've got an ice cream seller writing major speeches on the future of the country to do with Europe. So if we just run through some of the pictures alone that appeared in this article, it's quite extraordinary. Here's the lady, and she's obviously looking very professional there. This is the sort of person that we should be relying on to sort out our future in Europe. She's apparently a Christian, and I believe that she's had a Christian business which sold the crucifix to the lady who brought the case against British Airways. That is an amazing coincidence. We loved this picture. Here she is in a very relaxed environment with David Cameron. We've put a caption in for people because we think they were discussing a new brand of ice cream. But not only Cameron, she's deeply involved with Boris Johnson. And if that isn't enough, she's also been professionally involved here with Ian Duncan Smith. So £63,000 a year this young lady receives from the taxpayer. And this has helped David Cameron to come out with a superb speech on Europe. And just so that we can remember what David Cameron looks like, this is dross, and there's got to be a reason for it. The Mail article describes the speech as having been crafted by Claire. Now, I don't know whether this is some sort of message, but I wonder whether actually that's a slightly anti-Christian phrase. Who is this woman, and what is she really doing in this position of power? And now we're seeing Cameron for what he is, which is a puppet of the bankers and an ice cream specialist. It ties in quite nicely, sorry there Malcolm, ties in quite nicely with, of course, Tony Blair attempting to promote supermarkets.
I was just going to say that it's interesting because the photograph that we highlighted where they were discussing about the different type or different names for the ice creams they were making, it looks incredibly staged, that photograph.
Yeah, with the lighting and the sort of halo of white light around David Cameron.
Yeah, I just wonder what her agenda is in this, because it's a little bit like saying that Kate is just a humble like peasant, and that William married a humble peasant. We're drawing a similar comparisons in that they're saying, oh, she's just an ice cream seller.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think there's something special about this lady, and any of the viewers or listeners interested in this article and like to do some researching, can we ask the question, who is she? What is this lady, and how has she suddenly popped into such a position of power? Meanwhile, of course, the shambles in Europe goes on, but the propaganda has already started to lead up to a referendum. So here's the Express trying to kid us into the fact that UK's future in the EU is on a knife edge. What we're really seeing starting to happen now is that behind the scenes, the European movement, which of course still exists in Britain, is now flexing its muscles in the press and media in order to try and convince us that there is going to be some sort of open and honest vote I don't know whether you want to comment on that, Mike, or no? Okay. But what we think is going to happen is we're going to see massive propaganda in the press to try and lead us into the idea that actually it's all on a bit of a knife edge. 51% want to get out of Europe, 49% want to stay in. And then ultimately we're going to see a completely rigged vote on Europe, as was done, of course, with Mr. Ted Heath. And perhaps we should just emphasise, of course, that the Europe that Mr. Cameron wants to keep us in is still in an utter shambles. So poor old Greece getting it here again, where the riot police have stormed a train depot where striking workers had barricaded themselves in. And of course these workers are protesting against draconian austerity cuts, which really are forcing Greece as a nation into abject poverty. And that is where we are heading if we continue to allow David Cameron and his ice-selling colleagues to take us there. What's happening on the world stage, Mike? Davos, I think, is the big subject.
Well, Davos is the big subject, but this particular article is less about Davos and more about the financial system as a whole. And I absolutely recommend everybody reads this article on Forbes magazine, because it is very well written. The excuse me, the author begins by really taking the mickey out of the financial system. He's basically comparing the activities of the financial system to pilots. He starts off by saying pilots have a lot of time in their hands while flying long distance flights. What might they be doing with their time? Let's suppose we learned that pilots of major airlines were spending their time gambling large sums of money with other pilots while supposedly flying their planes. And he goes on then just to take the mickey out of the banking system in general and the activities of the banking system. He then goes on to point out that the uber rich who do attend the Davos conference are paying $25,000 for the privilege, as he calls it, of listening to self-serving palaver. It's a great article. He goes on to highlight the difference between banks and hedge funds is that the taxpayers are legally committed to backstopping the bank's activities. If hedge funds want to gamble their own money, it's their affair. And he's then basically just pointing out that the financial system is destroying this planet and we need to do something about it. I recommend people read that article. Absolutely brilliant.
Right, okay, and we should also say to people, do research the World Economic Forum and the people behind that if you really want to understand who's manipulating the economy at world level. And what have we got here? Reuters.
Well, we talked about this a week or so ago. This is the oldest bank on the planet. I think it's Monte dei Paschi di Siena Bank. I apologise if I got that completely wrong. In Italy, shares fell by 8% again yesterday as a result of the scandal over, well, basically it's bankrupt, but they tried to hide the fact it was bankrupt through various derivatives contracts with Morgan Stanley and other banks. So this is a bit of a scandal in Italy at the moment, because Italy is going through an election process, and Monti is saying he's going to have to recall Parliament to make a statement on it. But basically, the Monti and his government is being accused of covering up this. They have admitted that they've known about what was going on with this bank for a year, but this bank has the potential to bring down the Eurozone again. So
we're just seeing yet more exposure of corrupt banks here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, as a result of the non-action of people on the banks, we still have a very serious economic reality going on in Europe and in this country as well. So now everybody's talking about a triple dip recession. I'm just going to reiterate the fact we are in a depression, not in a recession. So this is a hyperinflationary, really quite serious breakdown of our economy and the financial system as a whole. So anybody that says that it's anything other isn't quite telling the truth.
And we stress that we are saying that this is totally controlled. It's a slow, chaotic but controlled breakdown, ultimately to destroy the economic basis of this country, well, and the other European countries.
Well, that's exactly right. I think that they are attempting to deflate this system in a controlled way. I think, though, that they're not in control, so they might think that they are. There's still plenty of opportunity for something sudden to happen.
Yeah. And we know that we could get rid of the problem overnight by simply ignoring, pushing to one side the fictitious banking debt and starting to issue our own currency.
Indeed, but we need to break up the banking institutions as well.
Yeah. So what does this mean for first-time buyers?
So bearing in mind that the entire British economy is based on house prices, house price inflation, this has got to be seen as a pretty serious situation. First-time buyers will need £60,000 deposit by the end of the decade and £110,000 in London. And the point that the Daily Mail is making here is that if you go back 20 years or so, the entire house would have cost you £60,000 or £110,000 in London, and now that's the size of the deposit you need. So the fact of the matter is that there are no first-time buyers coming along because this is an utterly unachievable target for them, that's basically taking the next generation away from property ownership, isn't it?
Of course, it's not only the prices, because those people who've been to university and studied, if you're in England at least, are going to have a massive student debt around their necks.
I'd just say as well that would you think that the goal was actually so that people don't have property? Because property is a security of wealth at the end of the day, isn't it? Something you can pass on to the future. I remember us talking about not so long ago, a few months back, where they're talking now where they're going to, well, they've relaxed the planning laws so that the companies can now go full ahead and start building houses, and if those houses don't sell, then the government's going to buy those. We've talked also about how moving people into government-funded housing.
They can be controlled. The housing associations.
Exactly. So in a way, it's like they've inflated a false sense of wealth in this country via the property, and then by bursting that bubble, not only do they rob the wealth of the country or as the nation, they're also robbing the wealth of the individual people. So it's almost like a double whammy in one hit.
Yeah, there's no inheritance; it's all taken away from you.
Yeah, and so while that housing bubble was inflating, these people have been very careful to tie a rope around it so then they can just pull it tight, and then in one foul swoop we're under complete, lock and key because we're in their houses.
Well, this is dealing with the next generation of property ownership, but as for this generation of property ownership, the only reason that this generation, as a general rule, the only reason that this generation is managing to hold on to its property, because they've overextended themselves with debt, as we all know, is because interest rates are staying low. If interest rates start to creep up, or if banks start to increase the mortgage rate in order to try to recapitalise themselves faster, we're going to see much more in terms of foreclosures.
Well, I've every confidence in David Cameron sorting this problem out, of course, Mike.
Well, he's been warned by the head of Goldman Sachs that he should really just back off on this agenda that he's got, which is really just, it's party politics at work here. It's local politics, but so the system wants him to back off from the criticism of large corporations who are not paying their taxes. That's really all there is to say on that article. But if we go on to the next one, we can see that he's in fact going to ignore these warnings, and he's going to use the G8 presidency to battle tax evasion, and he's going to he's given a speech again in Davos where he's going to say that it's an issue whose time has come. And that individuals and companies need to pay their fair share. I mean, what we're seeing here in reality is companies who are really stuffed economically at the moment, screaming about paying tax. On the other hand, we've got governments that are really stuffed economically at the moment, screaming that they need tax to be paid. So everybody's screaming that they need money, and there's nothing being done to generate, in a productive sense, any new money. They can keep pumping new money into the system, but what we're seeing here is the reality that doesn't work. And so everybody's saying, well, we're not paying the tax. The government's saying you've got to pay the tax. Nobody's got any money. The banks are bankrupt, and that's the reality.
Organised chaos, and Cameron there is the puppet. But interesting that the banks are telling Mr. Cameron what he should be doing. The Mail here picked up on the fact that the High Court judge has said that several eminent bankers should actually be named. The public had a right to know. This to me is also is really a sort of pup to the public. They know that the public is beginning to focus on bankers. Let's throw a few of them to the wolves. We can't name other people involved in criminal activities. We don't get near the subject of paedophilia in high places because courts don't want to talk about that. But now we're getting these bankers thrown to the wolves. So we thought we'd just call some of them up here. John Varley, here they are. But we can follow it through, and of course what we're seeing is good old Barclays mentioned again. Have a look into it. We've got people here who must have, with their widespread colleagues as a result of the interference of interest rates, they must have effectively defrauded millions of people.
They're being named and shamed, big deal. Why aren't they in prison?
Well, we wait to see. And a little bit more on Goldman Sachs here from Davos.
So they're saying that the worst is over at Davos. George Soros today as well was also saying that the worst is over. This is clearly nonsense. Again, you can't get any kind of agreement among these people because here's a US economist saying that the euro crisis could erupt again this year. So some people are saying the worst is over. Some people are saying the worst hasn't even started yet. I'm saying the worst hasn't started yet. These guys are talking nonsense, really.
And George Osborne is saying what?
Well, he's saying nothing. He's keeping a low profile, but he's not changing his austerity policy, as we'll see here. And he's decided he's going to ignore the IMF's warnings on austerity plans. We talked about that a couple of days ago. What more can you say? As far as he's concerned, it's business as usual with austerity. On the other hand, Clegg is saying that really we should have spent more money.
There he is, Mr. Clegg.
But of course, he's saying we should have spent more money, but he's not suggesting that it's sovereign credit. He's suggesting that we should have gone out and borrowed a lot more money in order to spend it on and get the country into even further debt.
All the politicians are completely ignoring at the moment this Bradbury pound option, which is simply to get the nation state reissuing money as credit, which solves the whole problem.
Indeed.
Okay, well, we just wanted to say on Mr. Clegg, he's a great one at hiding in the background. He's great at, what's he great at? This little slide here is showing that basically the subject of schools has come up. It's always a very thorny problem for politicians because they're obviously all extremely wealthy. So he's saying that if necessary, his son is obviously going to, I think his son is going to go into a very expensive school. I think it's just hypocrisy. They're always smiling. They are into the millions of pounds, but they try and make out that they've got the best interests of the rest of us at heart. I don't think so. Where's it going to lead? Well, it's going to lead to bailiffs.
This is interesting. I wait to see exactly what happens out of it, but apparently laws to tackle aggressive bailiffs will be introduced next year in England and Wales. It's saying bailiffs will be banned from entering homes at night or where only children are present, and new safeguards will prevent them from using force against people who owe money, and they'll also they'll have their fees reined in, so there's going to be a fee schedule imposed upon them rather than allowing them to set their own fees. But it's interesting because really the reason that this is happening, according to the government, is that a small minority of bailiffs have been able to give the industry a bad name. Now, I would say that perhaps that statement's correct. I don't know, but if we're talking about a small minority of bailiff companies, then I would also say that it's the largest bailiff companies that are causing the biggest problems. So it might be a small minority of companies, but they control the majority of the bailiffs, in my opinion.
Yeah, and
sorry, no, please.
They're all being used, of course, by the public sector. So local authorities, who are supposedly here as civil servants, are of course using these bailiffs as a private army.
I'd also say that this notion that they're going to statutarize all of these rules and regulations is they already exist. the point is that they're being statutized just like every other crime now is being made a statute, so that we can get away from common law, so that eventually they can cut those ties. You know, we've been having an interesting debate on the forums about free speech, and that the conversation evolved into threatening speech. You know, and the point is that they've made a statute about that, but that was already a law. You know, there was already a common law offence, like to threaten people. And the point is that they're statutizing all of this. You know,
so this is being overlain. We've got common law, which is the basis of the law, and over the top of it, we've got all of this statute. And what they're trying to tell us now is the statute law has authority when it doesn't. Well, we're just going to briefly come back on the subject of Davos here. This is something you picked up, Mike, on the subject of mindful.
So this is from the Huffington Post, and it's saying that a panel of experts explored what psychology has to offer when it comes to leadership in an interactive dinner session entitled The Mindful Leader. This grabbed my attention because you've been talking about mindfulness quite a lot recently, and I know it's a subject we are going to cover in more detail. So I just wanted to draw that to people's attention by way of an introduction, and perhaps people should go and read that article today.
Well, it ties in totally, of course, with the warnings we've been giving for many years about the activities of the political charity Common Purpose, creating leaders. We're now seeing Common Purpose working with the Duke of Edinburgh to get their leaders through the Commonwealth. This is taking us to a consensus on a global scale. And of course, the other thing we know, totally factual, is that the British government is using applied behavioural psychology in order to change our belief systems, views and values. At the moment, it's been hidden under the rather cosy title of nudging, but in reality, what we're seeing is the government using applied psychology to change the way we think and behave. Now, alongside the use of that psychology, we are seeing a massive increase in suicides. There's been some articles in the paper over the last couple of weeks in particular. This is all being blamed on depression and the economic climate, but research by UK Column and also many individuals across the country is starting to look in a totally different area, and that's the adverse effect of this applied behavioural psychology, including NLP. Oxford University is tied up in this at the moment. They're driving the mindfulness programme, and if we start to delve into that, we see that particularly young people are being given doses of this without any thoughts of the consequences.
We have somebody on the chat box saying, you know, it's useful if taught properly, and I think the key point with all these things, whether it be NLP or mindfulness or even the use of some of the technology that we criticize from time to time, these are tools, and if they're in the hands of people with a negative intent, they become extremely dangerous. So, you know, we don't propose throwing a knife in the bin because it's dangerous and used inappropriately. It's a tool that we use, and it's how it's applied that matters.
Absolutely, and I can reassure that particular person who's made that comment that we're getting a lot of information from within profession. So we've now got psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and some NLP practitioners working with us because they're deeply concerned about what's happening. But let's bring it into focus. This was sent to us. It's the 2013 calendar of bunny suicides. And if we actually have a look through, this is should go that way up probably. So we've got a lemon squeezer, which is being used to squeeze the brains out of a bunny. This is being freely sold at the moment. It's pretty unpleasant stuff. And of course, it totally flies in the face of Werther effect, where if we're pushing this this type of suicide material in front of people, it can cause problems. So we decided to have a look at who was behind this. This is actually the publisher to News, huge company based in New York. But the individual behind it is this gentleman, Andy Riley, and he's produced a number of so-called funny books on suicide. But of course, it's very interesting to see that this man is being used in writing scripts with the BBC and other media companies. So we'd like to warn here of the dangers of this type of material. We've emailed this gentleman to ask him how he justifies producing this type of material, particularly in view of what's happening with suicides of young people in places like Bridgend, Aberdeen and Northern Ireland. So we await his reply, but there's some very dangerous stuff being peddled at the moment by our government.
Just read out the titles of the other books. I thought it was really interesting.
Yes, okay.
The book of the bunny suicides, which is what we're talking about. The return of the bunny suicides. Great lies to tell small kids. Loads more lies to tell small kids. And DIY dentistry, selfish pigs, and dawn of the bunny suicides. So a wholly happy chap.
Just the sort of man you'd expect providing material for the BBC.
And children.
And children. So we'll finish up with a couple of quick articles here. This is the Scotsman, and Lord Brown is suggesting we should scrap the deterrent.
Well, this is really for you to comment on, I think, but Lord Brown is saying that, in this day and age, we don't really need a full-time deterrent. We don't need nuclear submarines running around the world. It's decreasingly effective and increasingly risky, he says, as a result of other nations getting developing their own nuclear capability. And of course, this is in the Scotsman. It's absolutely, the Scotsman article is full of comment from the SNP, and this article has to be related to the Scottish independence referendum and the comments, the story that we've been covering for quite some time about what is going to happen to Trident once Scotland gets its independence.
Mike, for me, this is very, very easy. The UK column has been reporting now for years that, of course, under the EU superstate, Britain was to be denied nuclear weapons. So what you see is total treachery by David Cameron and Westminster. British armed forces are being run down. We're being driven into the European army. And to finally strip power away from Britain as a nation state, they are going to remove the nuclear deterrent. And of course, independence for Scotland and the Trident base is being used as the what's the word? The driver for this. So we've been predicting for years that we were going to start to see the move to scrap a proper nuclear deterrent. We could have a debate on whether nuclear deterrents are a good thing or a bad thing, but the point that we come up with here is that we've got other nations at the moment clearly becoming better equipped and more aggressive. But the aim is to remove nuclear weapons from Britain because we are simply to be a region within the EU superstate.
Well, actually, this story was more to highlight the fact that North Korea is once again building up its rhetoric, but really it's not capable of doing the things that it is shouting about. At the end of the day, what's happening to this country is because it will not play ball with the global economic or global financial system, it is effectively on the receiving end of, I don't know what you might call it, technological apartheid. It's not entitled, according to the rest of the world, to develop any kind of technology for itself. It has to remain a third world country. They're clearly fighting against this. They're shouting about it. I don't think it's any more than words, but at the end of the day, I believe they have the right to develop their country as they see fit. It's their country, and if they want to do it without putting themselves under a debt burden of the financial system, that's really up to them, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah. And what about Hong Kong? We're doing a world tour, actually, to end the news today.
Well, what I wanted to highlight here again was the fact that the world is being blown up and that we're really heading towards a very serious situation in so many parts of the world now. We've talked about this spat between Japan and China over the islands that lie between. But now we've got Hong Kong and Taiwan getting involved in this discussion as well. So the protesters headed to the islands with Taiwanese flag. This is being built up as another flashpoint in the world between China and Japan this time and of course we know that Taiwan is working with the Americans to try and separate itself from mainland China as well. So again, Southeast Asia, they're attempting to blow that up just like North Africa and the Middle East. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's it for today. As usual, we've given you more than planned. So we're here at 1:45. Just a couple of small points to end on. For those local, we've got Clive de Carl giving his talk on health products and looking after yourself. That's in the Methodist Church in Totnes, starting at 7:30 tonight. So if you're local and can come along, please do. Look forward to seeing some of you there. And also, you've been talking to a few groups and people across the country. What's happening out there?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that strikes us is that people often call up and they ask us what can be done and what's the action. And our response, I think, generally, and I agree with it, is that the response has to come from everybody, and there isn't just one solution. There's a whole number of solutions. So I think the thing that we're interested in now is actually getting, because we have so many people phoning up saying, I want to help. But there's only so much that we can do here. The real work has got to be done in your local area. That's where the real work's got to be done. So we're quite interested in putting all of those people that call us in touch with all of you guys that are actually already doing something or you want to start doing something. So what we've started to do in the forums is we're actually inviting people who want to either start up a group in their area and be in contact with us, and we can help them where we can, or if they want to act as a point of contact where we can basically send people that come to us to you guys because they'll be in your local area. So we really feel that is the way forward, is amalgamating the sort of people that want to start working to prevent this and actually take direct action, because as you mentioned yesterday, action is the remedy. We can sit around and talk about as much as we want. We can highlight as much as this as we can, because that's really our main aim, because again, as you pointed out, unless we know our enemy, we can't act against them. So if you're interested in that sort of thing and you want to work with us, please do go on our forums, to the members section, to the post entitled UK Column Call for Action, and we hope to get as many people as we can and start working together.
We need to do something. We are going to do something. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. Do have a good weekend, and we look forward to seeing you same time, 1 o'clock on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you.